Freedom of Information Act, notice of meetings and agendas were posted and furnished to all news media and persons requesting notification.
Thank you very much. Can we have, Eric, you have an agenda over there for me? Sorry, I did not grab that first.
Underneath your packet.
Okay, sorry. Got it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so can we get an approval for meeting notes from October 9th?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Do we have any general public comments?
No, sir, no comment. No one signed up for comments at all.
Okay, thank you. Let's dive into the summer Greenbelt project applications.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we had 18 total projects submitted this cycle. You heard about 9 of those last week. You'll hear about the other 9 today, as well as the Red Top Park one that you heard about last week that was deferred. It's back for your consideration again. All right, so just like last week, we've got a good variety of projects. We've got 3 more conservation easements, several active parks, passive parks, and expansions of existing green space. These are all 18 projects spread throughout the county. And then the ones that you'll hear about today, starting up in the northeast, Fairfield Plantation 2, Carolina Seafood, the farm at McClellanville, and then moving down to Red Top Park near the urban growth boundary, Caw Interpretive Center Addition, Simmons Creek County Park, Main Road Park, Grayson Oaks, and Oscar's Place, all on Johns Island, and then the Tugadoo Boat Landing expansion. So again, these are the financial impacts if projects are approved. I want you to focus on those bottom rows again, outside of the grid lines, because those represent the impact of all 18 projects are approved this cycle. So looking at our rural funds, there's 11.37 requested. We have just under 20.7 on hand. If all were approved, it would be just about 9.3 million available for the next cycle. Urban funds, and this one, based on the action that was taken at the subcommittee meeting, this is not completely accurate, so I'm going to skip that for now until we get to Red Top. But overall, if all projects are approved this cycle, there would be 12.9 million left for the winter Greenbelt cycle. All right, and the first one for your consideration is Red Top Park from Red Top Improvement Association, and now Low Country Land Trust is going to be the lead applicant on this one through the Small Landowner Program. Red Top Park's located off of Old Charleston Road, about a half mile from the urban growth boundary. You can see the parcel highlighted in green here. About 3.3 acres are upland and 6.1 total. So these are new details on the project. It was resubmitted since Red Top did partner up with Low Country Land Trust and also received some assistance from Charleston County Park and Recreation Commission. So I'm going to give you the update. And that is, again, the changes. The request now is for $805,000, 6.1 acres, fee simple. It is in the urban unincorporated area. The breakdown on the request is $580,000 for the land acquisition, $211,000 for minor improvements, and $14,000 for admin, with just over a 50% match. And the match is still being sought. The subcommittee just heard that 2 grants are being applied for, but they won't find out until later in this year, November, December timeframe. $100,000 from the state bank for land acquisition, $100,000 from another organization for improvements to the park, and then $211,500 in additional fundraising and in-kind work that they're going to seek. Red Top has had a lease on this property for many years, and it has been a community park in Red Top for many more years than that. The lease does run out in August of '27. It would continue to be a passive and active park, and there was a Rosenwald school that was located on the site. So the intent is for potentially to have that replica reconstructed, and that be a community building and be part of the state Rosenwald School Trail, which is currently in the planning stages right now. So when the subcommittee first heard this, and when you all heard the subcommittee's recommendation, that was for deferral pending 3 different items that needed to be submitted for your consideration. First of those was a willing seller. We did receive a letter of intent from the school district's lead real estate person following school board action, allowing this person to negotiate the sale, or they did say the sale would be for $680,000, which is what the appraisal came in at, and that was the second item that you all asked them to bring back before you reconsider it. And then the third one was detail on the minor improvements. They were originally seeking $300,000 for minor improvements, but that's been pared down. Parks and Rec Commission helped them develop a budget for this based on their experience in developing parks. And that breakdown is $100,000 for a boardwalk along the marsh, $65,000 for a gravel drive and parking, $35,000 for an ADA gravel path, $7,500 for machine mulching and grading, and $3,500 for a wetland and tree survey that now totals $211,000. One thing I'll note is that Low Country Land Trust is again the lead applicant through the small landowner program. So if approved, they would get the project through due diligence and all the way to closing, and then transfer this property over to the Red Top Improvement Association, either simultaneously at closing or shortly thereafter. The score for this one was pretty low, but based on the resubmitted application, it took a considerable jump in points, right around 30 points or so. Staff very quickly scored it based on really just a lot of those objective factors like match percentage. And we felt like the staff score would now be right around 70 for this project. The subcommittee did meet just prior to this meeting, and they recommended approval of $805,000 in small landowner program funds. Small landowner program only has about $55,000 in it right now, so the recommendation was to fund that shortfall pro rata from both the urban and rural allocations. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Jones.
Your presentation indicated that there were 2 applications for considerable funds. We're being asked to approve this. Do we have an indication?
This is just an amended application. So this is an update to the original application that was submitted.
Okay, but the applications for these funds, are we certain they're going to be successful, or what happens if they don't get these funds?
So $100,000 of that is for actual land acquisition through the State Conservation Bank. So we wouldn't provide those funds until they went through all their due diligence and got to closing. So they would either not be able to close, and they would never receive the funds, or they would find a different funding source for that $100,000. The rest of the funding that's for improvements on the site, there was no special condition that they raise those by a certain time or anything like that. So it would just be something that Low Country Land Trust would work with the neighborhood association on to get those funds and those improvements completed.
So our approval is moot if their applications don't succeed?
Not necessarily. They could find alternative funding if the State Conservation Bank application was denied.
Raising funds themselves, right?
It could be, or seeking different funding sources.
Yes, Adam.
Customary for this body to approve Greenbelt funds when the matching funds have not been secured yet. I'm fairly new to the body, so I just want to make sure that we're not establishing protocol or something.
That's a good question. It has happened. There's usually questions about that, and there have been instances in the past that basically said, you need to raise these funds by a certain date or show proof of these funds. So you all can recommend any special condition of approval. So if you had concerns about that, that might be where you would discuss a special condition.
But Eric, in this case, we have nothing at risk if they are not successful raising the matching funds, correct?
That's correct. We
Yeah.
would not, our funding would not be provided until they're able to close. We would not increase our funding if they did not get the 100,000 from the state bank.
Andrew?
So, from what I understand, right now they are operating and maintaining this park and have been for some time. So to me, it should be theirs, and I think they will work very hard to get that additional 100,000 through this grant application or something else. And as far as the improvements, I think a lot of the times we're working with maybe raw land or land that needs these improvements in order to be utilized. But in this case, it's currently utilized and can be without these improvements. And to me, this is kind of more like, icing on the cake to get these additional improvements done. And as Eric described in the subcommittee meeting, the way that we fund the minor improvements is after the work is done, it's a reimbursement. So in my head that, yes, there's nothing at risk. Because they need the additional 100,000 in order to close. Otherwise, they don't get any of the Greenbelt funds and the minor improvements. While I'm sure they would enjoy them, the park is still being enjoyed on a daily basis as we speak.
Jason?
After you.
So a couple questions. Do we know if the school district has been asked to provide a donation of the land? Or has the school district indicated that they would reduce their asking price? So it's knowing that former Rosenwald School has been used by the community for however many years as a park. Just be interested to know if the school district, if anybody knows if the school district's been asked that or not.
Not to my knowledge. Sam, would anyone like to, from the project, like to speak on that? And I know there are some state laws about disposition of school land as well, which I'm not super familiar with.
So that was a conversation we had. First it was, there has been precedent set in the past of Charleston County School District of, donating land. The Lincoln Center in McClellanville is an example. So I brought that up with their representative as well as asking if they'd be willing to make a donation of value. They were not inclined to. The Board of Trustees from the school district approved for the sale of the property at appraised value.
Okay,
So
thank
that
you.
was what the representative was had authority to negotiate that at that price.
Got it.
Barbara?
And then I got one more point to that. Sorry, Barbara. So coming back to the urban unincorporated and this body recommending whether we take money from other pots of money. I don't know if that's happened yet. I know we've discussed it about the urban unincorporated. From a municipal point of view, I don't know if I would need support from our mayor and city council through resolution to do that. We spent a lot of time on redrafting this program a number of years ago. And I just want to make sure we don't get too ahead of ourselves and set precedent on something that may come back and be unattainable in the future.
Mr. Bell, please speak up if you won't, but my understanding is that to change allocations in the Greenbelt program, it takes a supermajority of county council to change the allocation. So to me, this would be changing the allocation, taking it from urban and rural and essentially giving it to the small landowner allocation. But as far as the municipality's role, I can't speak to that.
We'd have to look at, how this body would want to recommend into county council, but I believe Mr. Davis is correct that, as far as the initial unallocations are concerned.
Okay. And I know that from the municipal point of view is a little bit different than others of you on this board, but we represent a large constituency, mayors and city councils. So I don't want, if that recommendation came this morning, I haven't had time to really bring that to my mayor, evaluate the ramifications from the broader perspective, so I wouldn't feel comfortable voting on that today.
Just point of clarification.
Barbara's next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But if there's a point of clarification on this topic, I guess, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, it was a clarification of the funds would be coming from, we were talking about funding the small landowner program through the rural and urban unincorporated, correct? Not through the municipality fundings. I'm just
That
wanting
was my
clarification.
understanding of the subcommittee recommendation. I understood it to be a pro rata share from.
From all,
across the
oh,
board.
okay, understood.
Yeah, okay, got it. Barbara?
It just seems to me that it may be premature to vote on this because it's like a loose end. It seems to me, I don't know whether we've ever had a project that's been approved could we have a project approved on condition that they raise the money by a certain point? Or are we going to have to count the funds that we've allocated toward this project as being spent for a long period of time when other projects may come up in the meantime? It just seems a little premature to me.
So we have had special conditions before that required an organization to show evidence of raising those funds. I think it was a 5-year time limit to raise those funds. In this scenario, I think, as Mr. Todd Burke mentioned, the 100,000 is the key to me to be able to close on the project. Which, when is that? When do you find out about State Conservation Bank, Sam? End of the year. So I think by end of the year, you should feel pretty comfortable about the State Conservation Bank. Yeah, go ahead.
And to be clear, we would have a contract with the kill date on the property with the school district. So this wouldn't be a never-ending process where, we're spending 3 or 4 years or a year even trying to acquire it. It would, the contract, I think currently the proposed contract was, I think, a March 31st closing date, so 2025. So that would be the latest in which this project would go till. And so if for some reason my personal professional opinion, I don't foresee the State Conservation Bank not funding this, but if for some reason they do not, we have multiple other sources in which we can seek funding to close that gap.
I think it's probably worth pointing out, right, that the small landowner program has been a bit of like a neglected element, right? Isn't that almost like corridors in that we did not reach our percentage goals?
Small landowner is not a specific goal like corridors.
Okay.
But it is something that back during our 10-year, or was it it was the 5-year program and plan review, it was one of those topics we went over and over again and knew that we were going to get more projects that qualified for small landowner program, but that there was only $50,000 left. And my recollection was that you all said, let's take them one project at a time instead of making a move to reallocate funds towards the small landowner program at that time. You basically said, we'll take them on a case-by-case basis. So that was just why I'm reminding you that if you do recommend to approve this, you need to be clear on where you think council should take that funding from.
So if we did that, that it would require a supermajority of council every time because we're changing the allocations every time.
That's my understanding. And maybe 3 readings, depending on how the ordinance is written, if it's a change to ordinance.
Okay, well, do we have a motion or a suggested motion?
I'll make a motion that we defer and sort out these problems.
Okay, there's a motion on the table to defer it until some of these answers come available.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
When would it be deferred till?
I suppose to be deferred till next meeting?
Matt, typically with deferral, you specify exactly what you want to see and when you will reconsider that. Like with the first deferral, you said there's 3 things we want you to bring back, and once you have those, we will call a special meeting to reconsider it. So I would just ask for specificity about what you want straightened out exactly before you'll
And I
reconsider
guess
it.
I've got to be specific. I think certainty as regard to the applications that are pending, and I guess I'm not fully aware of all of what's going to need to take place for the reallocation. If we have to go to the council for approval of a supermajority decision, well, that's going to take time. I'm not sure I guess we'd have to approve it before it would go to council. I don't think council would look at it on an academic basis.
Right.
I think they'd want a project that would be depending on it. So, yeah, I guess. leave
So
it at
the
that.
2, until you find out about the 2 grants,
Yes.
there's one for 100,000 each.
Well, I'd like to get the other point clarified, but I'm not sure that is feasible at this stage. I know this is very gray, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, we can have some discussion around it, and maybe you can tighten it up after some discussion. Taylor, you have a question
Just a comment.
or comment?
Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm comfortable moving forward with this project. I think the 100,000, if they don't get the grant, they're not going to be able to close. And so the 580,000 is going to be there until they can do that. Low Country Land Trust has been a good partner. If they say they have other sources, I think they'll come up with those sources. It's just going to take a while to get this one through. If we have to change where the money's coming from for the small landowner, I'd like to go ahead and get this on so we don't have anything that holds us up for the March 25 piece. And I think splitting it between the 2, rural and urban, is fine. And I think that gives you time, Jason, to go back and work through that, find out what we think about maybe $400,000 out of the urban funds or less can come from. So I would like to see this project move on, and I would vote no against the current motion.
I could certainly get some details by the end of the week on what that would mean for each individual allocation.
Francis, let me add one thing to Taylor, and then you're next. I agree with Taylor. I think this is an important project and park. It exists. It's ready, and some good planning has gone into it. One way or another, we should fund it. Just because we're running it through the small landowner program, that seems to be the kink in the deal, not so much the project or the but the notion that we will eventually fund it. It's just trying to honor that small landowner element that has been neglected historically. Therefore, I agree with Taylor. I would vote no to your motion, and I think we should pass this project today. That's my vote, or that would be my suggestion. But, Francis was next.
I agree with you and Taylor about that. I think maybe putting a condition on the time, maybe like June 30th, 2025, that gives a little bit of extra leeway. If something happens and it has to be extended or something, that's something that we could talk about, but putting that time frame on there, in case another project comes up, we're able to pivot and utilize the money, so.
Yeah, their lease is in place to 2027. FYI.
Mr. Jones.
I suppose this is not probably quite appropriate, but I have to say, when I looked through all of the applications and your recommendations, there were a number of times that you've recommended approval, but there were still issues in terms of funding. And I'm concerned, are we moving away from, how shall I put it? When something comes before, it'd be nice whether it were black and white, but there seems to be things coming before us now that are not black and white. They're maybes and maybes. And I'm not sure that that's what we want to do. I would have thought that there should be finality in a decision and sort of we should know all of the facts, because I think there are other situations that are before us where we're depending on further decisions. We're not in, we could be approving things which we're not quite sure what we're approving. And, I sympathize with what you say, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we should vote for this. I don't have strong feelings, but I think I needed to wave the flag, and I've done it.
That's fair, yeah.
I think this would be a good kind of, see this first one through on the small landowner track and have county council vote on it. And then I think we should probably go back and revisit looking at funding that as with just an amount of funds going into it that we can utilize just like we do for the other programs now. But as for now, I'd say go ahead and do this one, put it through.
Yeah, Jason.
So again, if this recommendation came this morning to reallocate funds, I think we need to be very careful on that approach in that it sets precedent for the future of this program. Per your point, it's good to have everything nailed down. And I'm a parks guy, so I support the parks project. I'm just worried about what the precedent is that we would set if we make recommendations to reallocate money from other programs, again, from a municipal point of view, without me even having the opportunity to just talk to my leadership about that.
Okay, we still have a motion, and I do believe we have a second. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so then, is there any more discussion on Mr. Jones's motion? Then we're gonna vote.
Mr. Chairman,
Aaron, would you like
just to clarify something that was said earlier, even if you vote to defer, that recommendation will still go to county council with all of the other projects. So I think somebody said it would not go to council, but it will. Okay, that recommendation.
That's the decision they make, correct?
Right. Would you mind stating the motion as you heard it, just so there's no confusion?
I believe the motion I heard original was motion for deferral until a time when they bring evidence of receiving the 2 grants for $200,000, total of $200,000.
And I believe, and we have a second. So we're on the same page. Yes, Mr. Jones?
I was concerned about the issue of the funding and the split and whatever going to council. So if what you say is correct, it all goes to council anyhow. So council will be informed that they have to make a decision as to the funding, right? Okay. I can wear that.
So you stand by your motion?
I may not vote for it, but I'll stand by my motion.
Everybody understands the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Let's have a show of hands. All in favor, please hold your hand up. Okay, 3 votes. All opposed, hold your hand up. Okay, thank you very much. So then that motion did not carry. Do we have a second motion?
Excuse me, could we get the, could we get the nays one more time, just to make sure we have those for the minutes?
Sure.
Or maybe a roll call vote might be best.
Okay,
just
sure.
So we're accurate on that.
So,
I can call it.
okay.
You can mark, I'll call. Mr. McConnell?
No.
Mr. Jones? Yes. Ms. Waite? No. Mr. Kronsberg? Yes. Ms. Kravick? No. Vice Chair Scardon?
No.
Chair Moulton?
No.
Mr. Simonson?
No.
Mr. Todd Burke? No. Mr. Mills?
No.
Ms. Worthy?
No.
Ms. Pace?
Yes.
And Mr. Gear?
No.
So that motion fails. What was our tally?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Can we amend that motion to have that date, have an end date put on it?
June 30th,
I like-
2025.
Okay
That
with
was a good,
Okay. Then I'll amend the motion to approve with a date of June 2025,
30th, June 30th.
June 30th, to make the close, have the closing done in the, is that what you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's accepting subcommittee recommendation with also adding that deadline to it, correct?
Correct.
Which was the pro rata share from urban and rural allocations.
Correct.
Okay, that motion's on the table. Do we have a second?
second.
Thank you. We have a second. Any discussion? Jason?
I think that, from a municipal point of view, gives us time to get back with my leadership, the mayor, city council. So I would think that's a good approach.
Thank you. The other six?
This is not as procedural, and I may not state this correctly, but this seems like a good project. We have some procedural confusion or whatever. We want this to exist. We're asking for some unique situation, a little bit, funds, supermajority, some like, oh, we better be sure of this one if we're asking for this special situation. The only thing I wonder about for that is like, I worry about like, and this is where subcommittee, I'm like, hey, I'll trust the subcommittee, but like, what's the body called? Like, Red Top Improvement Association. Is that a good group that we know they're going to follow through and they're going to execute? And so it's worthy of an exception to a normal vote or recommendation. I mean, that's real, like, base layer, and I don't know if you can even answer that in public. But that's just, like, if we're going to ask for some of this unique situation, do we feel super good? It sounds like the project we do.
I can make a brief comment on that from what we heard during the presentation by the Red Top Association during the subcommittee meeting, the original one, they have been on this park for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
Technical lease from 2007, but been operating and using this park from well before then. This seems to be like their community center, de facto, and it has been, I mean, there was lots of compelling stories and history on the site. So everything that we heard sounds like they are currently acting as if it is their park and their property, and it seems to be a staple in the community. So we, at least I'm not speaking for anyone else in the subcommittee, but what I heard made me feel very comfortable about that this is their park and they treat it as their own with respect.
So there's a history of saying, man, these guys are going to do a good job with this. Okay,
Right, like they already are.
That just makes me feel better to vote for a semi-exceptional situation.
That's good. Nora?
Would it be okay if the land trust described what they were going to, shortly what they're going to do to get this ready to hand over to the Red Top Association?
Nori, could you use the mic, please?
Would it be possible for the land trust to describe what they're going to do, before they hand this over to the Red Top?
Sam?
I mean, with this particular situation, in comparison to, say, like the B Field project from last year, where it was a raw, undeveloped property, where we're working with the community to develop it. This park has already developed. It's in existence. The Red Top Improvement Association has borne all the costs associated with managing the property for, on a technical basis since 2007, but I would say even up well past that, all the way from the 70s, 60s. So, apart from the minor improvements, which will be improvements to the existing park to kind of increase the quality of the space, it's, I was out there a week and a half ago. It's mowed, it's well maintained, it has a well maintained community center on the property with bathrooms, lights, it's a well taken care of space. So nothing from the Low Country Land Trust perspective, it'll be a simultaneous closing, transfer ownership of the property immediately to the Red Top Improvement Association. So.
Thank you. Jason?
One quick question from the land trust point of view. When the land trust does these, do you continue to monitor it, or does it go over to Greenbelt staff, or so you both monitor?
Yeah, so we'll either place a deed restriction or conservation easement on the property, and we'll monitor that in perpetuity.
Okay, great news. Thank
Staff
you.
will as well.
Yeah.
Annually.
Okay, well, we still have a quorum, so Taylor's not, I mean, not Taylor, excuse me, Charlie's not here, but we can vote. Unless there's another question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Can I abstain?
Sure. Yeah, okay, so we have one abstention, but the motion carries.
All right. Thank you.
Just for the record, I have nothing against the project. I think it's a good project.
Okay, next.
Next project for your consideration is Carolina Seafood Highway 17. This is located up in McClellanville, as the name suggests, right off of Highway 17 between North and South Pinckney Streets. The area in green is the subject property today. You can see there's one piece over here, one down here. The yellow piece is not included in the deal, and the intent for that is to eventually be the landward side operations for a seafood cooperative that's working the waterfront in McClellanville. So the request was for $715,500 for 14.7 acres, fee simple in the rural area. There's the breakdown between land, admin, and minor improvements. They're offering a 21% match of $150,000, and all of this match goes towards the land purchase. Subcommittee recommended approval of $715,500 in rural funds, and they did receive 6 letters in support. The intent is for it to be a passive park space, a green space, that with the next project you will hear about will connect all the way back down to other Greenbelt projects along Jeremy Creek and then back into downtown McClellanville. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Excuse me, Mr. Jones.
The original, what you set out to us, noted the benefits of the linkage. I looked at the map and it wasn't apparent. Could you just give us a little detail about the linkage?
Sure, let me, I'm actually going to skip ahead now to the farm at McClellanville, which is the next project. So the property, if you look at the map there, the subject property is across Graham Farm Road right here.
Right.
Where the
So
laser
that's where
pointer
your
is.
marker is, that's the property.
And then this is the next project you'll hear about, the farm at McClellanville,
Right.
which is a conservation easement, but the landowner has agreed to allowing a path through the property that would then connect down to South Pinckney Street, and there's an existing bridge that goes over to the, I think it's called Creeks School, and then there is an existing greenway along Jeremy Creek that was Greenbelt funded in the past that goes back into downtown McClellanville.
So there's not a direct linkage between that parcel there and what you just referred to along the road?
Not without this one.
Okay.
The farm at McClellanville, which is
Okay,
the
thank
next
you.
project on the list.
Okay. Any other questions or perhaps a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve and a second. Or any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great, thank you. The motion carries. Next, farm at
As-
McClellanville.
Previewed, the farm at McClellanville, another project from Low Country Land Trust, located off, right across, as I said, from Carolina Seafood and off of Graham Farm Road. These 2 parcels right here, which total 5.4 acres, and the request is for $26,250 for a conservation easement using rural funds. There's the breakdown between the easement acquisition and admin. There's a 91% match being offered of $24,000, with the bulk of that being a donation of value from the landowner. As I mentioned, the trail would be, this piece would be a crucial link in connecting the green space up at Highway 17 back down to the green spaces closer to downtown McClellanville and Jeremy Creek. They received 2 letters in support of the project, and subcommittee recommended approval of $26,250 in rural funds.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions for Eric? Or perhaps Motion. Excuse me, who said that? Ms. Jones, you said that? Okay, we have a motion for approval. Second. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great, the motion carries. Next.
Another Low Country Land Trust project, which will be a common theme for the rest of the day. This is the Caw addition, which is on the north side of Highway 17 in Ravenel. It's immediately adjacent to a Greenbelt funded property called T Farm Creek, and then Caw is just to the left of that property. So this is your subject property highlighted in green. T Farm Creek's right here, and then the larger Caw property picks up there. The request is for just over $2.1 million for 35.2 acres in fee simple acquisition in the rural area. There's your breakdown between land and administration. Match being offered is 40%, just over $830,000, with $110,000 of that being for land, and then over $720,000 pledged by the Park and Recreation Commission, which this property would be transferred to after closing. If not approved, the owner intends to develop or sell the property, and if approved, it would be transferred to PRC. They received 2 letters in support of the project, and the subcommittee did recommend approval of $2,101,500 in rural funds.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. Jones.
I have a problem reading my writing, actually, so forgive me. I did look at all of these things, and I think it says here there was no appraisal that was available. Did I read that right?
Well, we certainly wouldn't pay above appraised value, but David, could you give us a quick update on the appraisal? I honestly cannot recall.
That's right. Yeah, there is no appraisal at this time. There is one in process. We don't have the results for that. We are extrapolating from a prior project that this board approved and the county council approved, the Sea Island Small Farmers Cooperative project, which is just down the road from this one. It's also on deep water like this one, similar in size, similar in makeup in terms of upland and highland and marsh. And that one appraised for $1.825 million back in, I believe it was early 2022, possibly 21. So it would be conditional on the appraisal to actually apply this money to the project, but we don't have an appraisal at this time.
The property was bought by the owner, present owner, in 2022. Do you know what he paid for it?
The present owner actually purchased it this year.
Okay.
Paid just over $1.6 million for the property.
And we're paying $2.1 million.
That's right, yes.
Okay. This again comes into the category to which I was referring. I mean, we're asking us to approve this without having all of the details. I don't like it. It may well be a great property. I concede. I'm not going to argue about that. And I'm all in favor of Caw. It's great. But just as a matter of principle from where I'm sitting, I don't like this.
Can you go over the numbers of the other project you referenced as
Yes,
kind of a comp?
that was the Sea Island Small Farmers Cooperative property,
Okay.
which is now owned by Charleston County Park and Recreation as well, which is intended for this property. It appraised for $1.825 million.
And how big is it again?
It is 20 acres total, 6 to 7 acres of highland. This one has 11.6 highland and 35 acres, over 35 acres total. And if I may, I respect your concern, Mr. Jones, but if I may, just from a project development standpoint, address that. Frequently in projects, things are in motion and not all lined up by the time that projects come in front of the funding agencies. And we understand that everything that is required for projects to be completed is a condition of actually applying the money. But in terms of the timing of being able to get a project done, we have to bring the project in front of the body at the time that we do. And this is one of those cases. In order to secure the opportunity and to meet the due diligence requirements for a later closing, we had to bring it in front of you at this time.
start at the end, Adam.
Again, I'm new, but I thought an appraisal would be fairly customary as part of the application process, and I'm not sure how it gets through subcommittee without that.
We don't require an appraisal for it to be considered, but we do require an appraisal prior to closing.
So how can this body allocate funds when you don't know what your purchase price is? I'm just a little bit confused about the sequencing
So-
of that, and then also. It sounds like a lot of people were scrambling to get projects in by the deadline and not really had these things fully shored up. I know there's a potential, probably other sale out there somewhere that they're trying to circumvent that sale so it doesn't get developed. I understand the urgency there, but it does seem like there's that some of these projects are coming preliminary to fully being flushed out.
So to answer your first question, our rules and regulations for the GAB basically say if there's major changes, like big changes to purchase price or matching funds or any of that stuff, it has to come back to the GAB for reconsideration. I think your second question was related to projects not being fully buttoned up and ready to go, and I would just say we've had at least one or two of those just about every cycle. Seems to be the nature of the beast to me, but that's certainly up for you all to take into consideration when you're making your recommendations.
Thank you.
I believe we had other questions coming down the line. Francis,
Yeah, I was just wondering when you project you would have the amount the property's worth?
Are you asking about the appraisal?
Yeah, when would you think that would?
I think we will have it within the next month.
Okay.
Jason.
So I too have the same concerns as you that the level of scrutiny that an urban project would receive from this body among the county council concerns me that there's so many projects coming through that aren't fully vetted from an appraisal point of view. And I don't know if there's more coming down the pipe or not, but knowing that the Greenbelt program will only pay appraised value, that gives us a little bit of reassurance there. But I would support this project. I'm just a little concerned about getting back to a couple of years ago. I think we've had these same discussions of not having a complete application. Again, the urban projects that I've been associated with receive such scrutiny that these are legitimate questions. So, and I'm in favor, but I would just hope we can tighten this up in the future. And I don't know if we need to evaluate the Greenbelt program and determine what an acceptable application is or not. Just kind of put that out there for future thought.
Would you, I mean, Andrew?
I don't disagree with any of this, but I guess if we're going technically by the books, an application is not needed, or an appraisal is not needed at the time of application.
Correct.
I mean,
they
if
can
we
provide fair
think-
market value, and
Right.
that we ask for the basis upon which that
So
fair market value
if we
was
want to
developed.
change that, I think that's probably a separate discussion. Once again, I'm not in disagreement with that and wanting to change it, but if we're like going by our rules that we approved, that is the rule, that they don't need to provide that. And I guess the reason that we were okay with that, I'm just speaking for myself, trying to remember, is the fact that we know that the Greenbelt will not pay for larger than the assessed value. So I guess the question is, if the assessed value comes in lower than, I guess, simply this number just gets changed, and how does that work? If this goes to council and then the appraised value comes in afterwards, does it have to go back to council?
It would come, by our rules, it would come back to the Greenbelt for reconsideration and then a new recommendation to county council.
Got it.
I'll tell you what I've seen more often than not is the appraised value it usually comes in higher.
Right.
And therefore their match goes up, which is technically advantageous to the county in that scenario.
Well, based on the comments, would anybody like to make a motion, or Taylor, do you have a?
Just one more thing. I think part of the, also, one thing that makes this, the piece happen is our schedule. I mean, we have how many cycles? 2 cycles a year?
2 cycles per year. The State Conservation Bank has quarterly cycles now, I'm pretty sure, and that's.
So maybe we could look at our.
Sometimes there's some conflict between the two on knowing when funding is approved.
I think it's a good subject. I think we ought to meet and talk about as a board. Maybe we start meeting on a monthly basis or something like that and not have cycles to where, you could say everything has to be in place and then we'll meet and talk about it. But that if we're just going to meet twice a year to talk about projects, we're going to get some that are fully complete and some that aren't. And that's something that we've lived with for the past few years.
Well, once again, technically it is complete, right?
The application.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's complete, you're right, by our rule set. I agree with you. But
Whether I agree with that.
whether or not they go through Eric's group, it's not going to get through until there is an appraisal.
Right.
Eric, given the large dollar value and the concerns that you've heard today, or maybe this is for David, would the deal be in question if it got deferred until the appraisal came in? Would the opportunity be lost, or?
Our timing was based on the cycles that you have, and our due diligence period ends in January, the end of January, so before you guys would be meeting again under your normal schedule. And so that's why we put this in, because we'll have earnest money going hard and have to put up additional earnest money at that time in order to preserve the opportunity to move forward and close before the end of the fiscal year.
Got it. Mr. Jones.
I'm in favor of this project. I suppose I seem to be an adversary, but I think it's just really a matter of tightening up what we do. You talk about the difference in the appraisal. If the owner is going to bump up his match, then there's no issue as far as we're concerned. But if the appraisal were 20% more, then that does become an issue, or could become an issue. So I really don't want to vote against any of these, but I just feel, again, I need to wave the flag. I think we just need to tighten up our approach.
You could put that in a motion if you wanted, that condition you just
I'm
put.
not sure I can remember it.
Which is the landowner match if it goes up in value.
Sorry?
What you said, what I heard was a landowner match if it comes up in value, that this is the number that's being asked for, and that's fixed once we agree on it.
Then that's fine.
Yeah.
So you want me to put that in?
Process anyway, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, that's the process anyway. So,
You would
Jason?
have to come back if they wanted to increase their ask.
Well, but he's actually saying if it goes up, the mechanism's already in place. The landowner would have to.
Or the land trust
We
would have
would-
to
we
come
would-
up with something.
preliminarily accept a landowner increase in match. But that's procedurally doesn't work?
That's the scenario that happens most often. So they request an amount based on we think it's worth this much, and the appraisal comes in higher, and then that landowner will typically donate that higher value. So
At that point, it
but
doesn't have to come back
The
to
issue
us.
is if it comes in under.
Right.
And then we've approved an amount based on a higher appraisal, so then it would have to come back to you all.
Wait a minute, say that one more time? If we approve this and it comes in lower, you're not going to pay more than the appraised price.
Correct.
Right. So it sounds like to me the mechanism is there to protect the Greenbelt funds.
Correct.
I feel like it is. I
If
don't
the
think we
landowner
need an
says, well, I
additional
think it's
condition.
worth 2 million and it's 1.6 is the appraisal, you're not going to give them 2 million because we approved 2 million, you're only going to give them 1.6.
And even
Somebody
then, I
else has
think
to
we
come
would
up.
bring it, I think it would still come back to you with such a huge change. Our rules say that major changes like that, it has to come back for reconsideration, and that's what the state bank would do as well. Because I think were you getting 100,000 from the state bank for this one? No? PRC, that's right. So sometimes when, the state bank has money in it as well, obviously we're not going to give them more money than what the purchase price is, so it would have to come back.
Jason?
So not to belabor, but can you remind me what the highland versus wetland total acreage is?
Yeah.
Got it, but I don't remember.
Yeah, go ahead. I've got 7.5 acres. Well, sorry, it's all broken down. Go ahead, David. You know it offhand.
The total acreage of the tract is 35.15 or 05, just over 35 acres, and the Highland acreage is 11.6.
Okay, thank you.
And then open water and 22 acres of salt marsh.
And if there was a motion to approve, even if we said contingent on appraisal, that's automatic, because we won't pay more than the appraisal. So there's, just for clarity there. So that it's already built into the process, even though we're talking a lot about appraisals. To your point about.
That's part of our
major-
due
right.
diligence requirements. You know, we've got to get the appraisal and review it and all of that before we can even schedule the transfer for closing.
I think we're probably ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next.
Next, Low Country Land Trust project for your consideration is Fairfield Plantation 2, located right up here on the county line on the South Santee River and east of Highway 17. You can see a red line right here through the property. So this is the subject property, and it's adding on to a previously funded conservation easement from Greenbelt. It's 254 acres. Request is $317,800 for a conservation easement in the rural area. Breakdown is just below. Match is over 200% at $640,000, with most of that being landowner donation of easement value. They received one letter in support of the project, and the subcommittee recommends approval of $317,800 in rural funds.
Any questions?
Make the motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. A second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The motion carries.
Next Low Country Land Trust project for your consideration is Oscar's Place. This is another conservation easement located on Johns Island on River Road, just across from Mullet Hall. This is the subject property. And the request is for $314,000 and change for just under 50 acres for a conservation easement in the rural area. There's the breakdown between land and admin, 158% match being offered, and that's just below $500,000, with the bulk of that again being donation of easement value from the landowner. One letter was received in support, and the subcommittee recommends approval of $314,875 in rural funds.
Any questions? Perhaps a motion? Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
Next Low Country Land Trust project for your consideration is another one on Johns Island called Grayson Oaks, located between Humbert Road and Main Road. So it spans this, kind of cuts the corner through here, highlighted in green. And the request is for just over $2.9 million for a fee simple acquisition, this time of 94.4 acres. Matches $1.1 million or 38%. And those are funds from both the South Carolina Conservation Bank and the landowner donation of value. The intent is to lease this property to a farmer to continue it as a working farm and in agriculture, work with the farmer for public access to the property, things like school trips and a market, different ways to experience working farmlands, as well as future public trails once the improvements, bicycle and pedestrian improvements are made on Main Road. And the subcommittee did recommend approval of $2,912,500 in rural funds.
Any questions? Mr. Jones?
I think I'm repetitive and I continue to have problem with my writing. I've got a question here, funding secured question mark. Sounds familiar.
I believe the state bank funding was approved earlier this month.
Okay, just for the record, again, it's my inadequacy in reading writing. I had, in Fairfield and Oscars, you referred to draft agreements, and I can't remember exactly anyhow, I won't go back. It was just another question mark.
I think those could have been draft easement terms. So they'll typically submit a set of draft easement terms with their application, and then the full details are worked out after approval and prior to closing.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, Adam?
The final owner is Low Country Land Trust. Who is leasing it back to the existing owner? Is that how that works?
No, not the existing owner. Existing owner's taking his cattle to his other farm over in Colleton County, I believe. They'll sell their whole interest in this. And then the land trust is working to put out a call for other farmers to then lease that property. And I'm sure Natalie could provide some details on that for you. She did in the subcommittee meeting, and the details are escaping my memory right now, but there is a process for that in place. Natalie?
Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Olson. I'm with the Low Country Land Trust. And that is correct. We are looking for specifically new and expanding farmers to provide an opportunity for them to access some farmland on Johns Island. And so we are working to identify the tenant or potential tenants. There is a program with the South Carolina Department of Agriculture that keeps a list of individuals and businesses that are on the lookout for land to lease. And so we've gotten that list from them and are just trying to find the right tenant that especially can provide a lot of the public access opportunities that we're hoping to on this property. But the Low Country Land Trust will be the long-term owner, and we will be leasing it out on annual or 2 to 5 year lease terms for agricultural users.
And that list is promising, like there's a lot of interest.
There is, it's actually, word of mouth is actually useful too. I mean, we do a lot of work on Johns and Wadmalaw, and we have a lot of partners that are in the agricultural space. And so some of it is word of mouth. It's, we're looking for a little bit of a unique situation here where we want to provide as much public access as possible. And so we're still sorting through what the options are. But yeah, there is a good amount of demand for leasing farmland. And leasing farmland on Johns Island and Wadmalaw especially is very, very expensive. So we're excited to be a landlord in a way to help kind of provide a little bit more supply there.
And does it represent like a really good deal to that farmer, or is it market, or how do y'all do that?
We are, we've kind of drilled down on what our overhead costs are going to be covering property taxes. And the averages for leasing farmland throughout the state run the gamut, depending on where the property is, what type of infrastructure it offers, what type of farming you can do. So we've identified the range that will cover our overhead, and that's it. And to the extent that there's anything additional coming in, it'll be put back into the project. But it's not. We have another farm that we manage out in Mount Pleasant. That's a Greenbelt funded project. And so we're familiar with the leasing terms and kind of what type of investments we need. So we're trying to find that sweet spot of, it's not going to be any on the far end of the spectrum in either direction. The idea is to make it affordable for new and expanding farmers, and the Land Trust as a nonprofit, we're not trying to get rich on this or anything like that. So it's, we're figuring out what the overhead is and what's affordable based on statewide and regional and then local averages of leasing land and finding the right fit there.
Sounds good. Jason?
Is the Mount Pleasant project your only other lease scenario similar to this?
It is currently, yes.
I think it's a great approach and definitely secures that farmland for the future.
Other questions for Natalie? Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions or perhaps a motion?
Move to approve.
We'll move to approve. Nora seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next.
Another Low Country Land Trust project. This is Main Road Park, and some of you will remember hearing about this one, I believe a couple of cycles ago now. Located on Johns Island, just off of Main Road, highlighted in green right here. This is Patton Avenue down to the south of it. And actually Grayson Oaks right here, catty-cornered, one you just heard about. Plans for Main Road Park, if approved, would be for an active and passive park. Low Country would partner with the Barrier Islands Little League they would construct some ball fields, a pot of ball fields right in the middle of the property where it's already an open grassy area, as you can see in the photo. Their request is for $1,685,950 for 40 acres in fee simple acquisition in rural funds. There's your breakdown. Match is just under 40% at $660,950. The landowner donation is over $283,000, and primarily the Little League has pledged $317,700 in planned improvements, which, as we noted in the subcommittee meeting, is what they feel very, very comfortable about. It'll likely be way more than that when they start building ball fields, but that's the number that they went with. I mentioned that the ball fields would be built first, and then later on in the treed areas and the wetlands, there's opportunity for trails and boardwalks throughout. I did not note how many letters in support, but I think that was over 300 letters we received in support of this project, and the subcommittee recommends approval with a condition of $1,685,950. That special condition, just like it was when it came to you before, is that while the Little League shall have top priority over athletic field usage, to the extent practicable, accommodations shall be made to allow the public to schedule park or field time when those areas are not reserved for league activities. Little League shall provide documentation of field, park scheduling, and usage at the request of Greenbelt programs. Any questions?
Start, Mr. Jones.
Looking at the submission, I recall seeing that in the future probably $10 million would be required. I'm not quite sure why that would be and where would it come from. How important is it to the project?
Maybe that was for full build out of all park items.
So
can you answer any more than that? Okay. This is Natalie Olson's, another one of her projects.
We also have representatives from the Barrier Islands Little League here today, too, who can help me answer some of these questions. But yes, the $10 million is the estimate of the full build-out of the full park over time. And that is based on a similar sized park, I believe it was in Texas, right? And so that's where we got the budget for the full. That would involve 5 fields, the concessions, the lighting, the fences, the unpaved parking. So that's the whole field estimate. We're thinking that's going to take a couple of years. The Barrier Islands Little League has a lot of donated services, donated labor, donated materials that are pledged at this point in time, along with some pledged donations of money. And so it will be an ongoing effort to raise that full money and all of the labor and everything and get the full $10 million park done. But that's why the Little League has sort of staged it out a little bit, and that's why we only have the 317 in planned improvements, because that's sort of the initial tranche of work that's going to be done to get the park open. So the idea is to set it up. There's such an immediate demand for more fields on Johns Island and more practice space that the Little League is going to try and get some small fields, some sort of temporary fields up and running as quickly as possible. And so the 317 will, of planned match there is that initial getting the entrance set up, getting the parking set up, and getting a few small fields ready. And then the $10 million is the 5-year-ish time frame of build out. And to the extent that I don't think this is expected, but to the extent that the full 10 million wasn't raised, or the idea is to get going on the park as quickly as possible and to have it in stages so that it's usable as quickly as they can. And then, if they don't end up getting the full 10 million, then aspects of the design will change, but the park itself will still be working and used by the Little League.
Ask then, you would have proceeded with this application if somebody said there's no way you're going to raise 10 million and get these aspirations achieved, you'd still go with this project as it is?
Yes.
Jason, did you have one?
Yeah, couple different questions. There's a residential structure on the property currently, is that correct?
Yes.
And once a purchase is completed, will that no longer be used as a residential structure?
That is correct. It will
Okay.
be retrofitted in the current plans, it's going to be the concession, scorekeeping, bathroom, maybe a small area for blockers, that
Okay.
sort of thing. But yes, the idea is to not have it as a residence, is to retrofit
And
that
and
building.
that's conditional on the grant application and closing, right? That it's not residential.
Correct.
Yeah. And then I think the application had the tree cover remains, no additional impact to the tree coverage. So with, I'm not sure if there was a concept master plan provided with the planned improvements. Will the planned improvements require the removal of tree coverage?
We haven't had a tree survey done yet. That's one of the first things on the Barrier Islands Little League list. We've been out to the property and done some site visits and kind of overlaid them over the initial sketches. There's not a conceptual, but an actual drawing for this. There have been a number of sketches
Okay.
and concepts. And like I said, they've got the architectural drawings from the other park. And so we've been looking at the trees, and obviously the Low Country Land Trust has an interest in preserving as many trees as possible, as does the Barrier Islands Little League. So they're working very, very hard to design the fields so as to minimize tree impacts. But the idea of us having this property split up into an active area and a passive area is to allow for the active area to be where the fields are. And
Right.
I think it's possible that there would be some grand tree impacts. I'm not sure at this
Okay.
point in time, but the conservation easement or deed restriction that we will record on the property at closing will have the standard tree protections that Low Country Land Trust has, which is it requires our approval of any tree impacts. So we'll be working with the Little League through that process to minimize impacts, but I can't say at this point in time because we haven't had a
Okay, but
survey.
I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the application said that the tree canopy will not be impacted by future development. Am I thinking about a different application?
It could have been in the narrative of, if you can see from the aerial there, the active area is where it's open, and then the passive area is where all the trees are, and those haven't been cut for
Right, I
our
understand that,
historic
but I
aerials.
think the
Yeah.
application said that the tree canopy will be preserved with no impact to the tree canopy. Am I thinking about a different application?
Eric's checking.
Yeah, I can't check the full application. I was just trying to check the summary.
Right.
Well, and I can confirm that is the case, certainly with the passive area. That the passive area, which is over 2/3 of the property, is not going to be slated for any sort of clearing or anything like that. There will
I'm
be
just
buffers.
talking about details here because and again, I don't have it in front of me. If the application said, we're building this park, we're not, as part of the application, we're not impacting the tree canopy, but in the future, we're going to build all these fields and impact the tree canopy, it's two different things. I just was looking for a little clarification on that. And then, so at what point would it be open to the public? Is it open to the public prior to any baseball fields being established, or if it's the purchase is
Not
complete?
until the first fields are established.
got it.
Originally, and this is shifting a little bit depending on how many kids they've got on the list. There was a discussion about having 2 smaller kind of temporary fields out there within the first 6 months or so. But we need to make sure that there's safe vehicular access
Okay.
and parking and
My
stuff.
last question to that point would be that, is it gated at any point in time? So if Berry Island's not using it, is there a gate?
I would expect so. We haven't gotten into specific, line items on the site plan or expenses, but there has certainly been a good amount of discussion about the security. I know that security with this type of a property where you've invested a lot in getting the fields nice and getting the lights nice and everything, can't have it open, especially in such a, kind of heavily trafficked street out front there on Main Road. And so I would say there's going to be a gate for security reasons and a fence. But I think that's what the special condition points to, is that there's going to be some sort of reservation system. The gate should be open whenever the Little League is there, and that's when it would be open to the public. And then to the extent that it's reserved by anybody from the public for family gatherings or birthday parties or whatnot, then there would just be a code or something like that to allow them to access it. So I would expect so for safety, but certainly the reservation system will allow additional access even if the gate looks closed.
Mr. Kronsberg, the application summary, I put in that the applicant will leave the wooded area undisturbed and undeveloped with walking trails and picnic areas. That could be what you were remembering there, and I might have said that better if I said the passive area. So I think with some of with your initial presentation and application, it shows where the active and passive areas are, which basically the active area aligns with that existing, the grassy area around the home site on the property.
So in the future, if they wanted to build more ball fields and had to go into that forested area, would they have to come back for a grant amendment or an application amendment? If
Yes.
If the project's restricted to the application?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The grant agreement references the application.
Okay.
And incorporates that, and then it's recorded with the deed.
Thank you.
Now, are the trails open all the time? And do they coincide with the first ball fields being built?
I don't think they're at the top of the list. I think, so currently on this property, there are some old trails that were cut for four-wheelers. So it shouldn't be not starting from scratch with the trails. But it's something that is a little bit farther down on the list just to get the fields up and running first. I think the trails are of interest. But I don't think that they will be, at least initially, it's not going to be open all the time. The trails wouldn't be open all the time. They would just be available to anybody visiting the park who's either reserved or while you're there during games or practices or whatnot. And so I think initially it's going to coincide with the Little League's, the access to those trails would coincide with the Little League's use of the property or the reservation system. I think eventually down the road, it would be the idea is that this park is going to be in use so much that it's essentially open a lot of the time. But no, they won't be the first thing that's done. But they will be once the Little League has some use and some access. Really, access is at the top of the list, making sure that we got entries and exits for vehicles and stuff, and then some unpaved parking. But they'll be sketched out in the plan from the beginning as they start to get architectural drawings and approvals from the county and whatnot on site plans.
Can you put that condition back up, please?
And this was the same condition when the project was approved previously. As a reminder, they withdrew their application just prior to county council considering it. So
And
it's back
then,
to-
sorry, last question. So the project, the land will be deeded to the Berry Island, or Land Trust retains ownership?
It will be deeded to the Barrier Islands Little League with a conservation easement or deed restriction from the Low
So
Country Land Trust.
continued monitoring between
Yes.
both entities? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments, or perhaps a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, Mr. Jones, motions for approval, you second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The motion carries.
All right, we're going to switch it up for your next project. This one was submitted by Charleston County Park and Recreation Commission. It's the Tougadoo Boat Landing Expansion located off of Parishville Road, right down here. The green again shows the site, and it's adjacent to an existing boat ramp that's currently maintained and operated by PRC. The request is for $950,900 for 1 acre fee simple acquisition in the rural area. This would be a reimbursement project if approved. There's the breakdown. Most of it is for the actual land purchase. Match being offered is 173%, or over $1.6 million. $40,000 of that is the value of the structure, which is that existing pier head. And then PRC has about 1.6 in planned improvements. And what some of those improvements would be is to improve traffic circulation for the boat ramp, provide some off-street parking, as well as a dock for water access and fishing, and just general public green space. We did receive 2 letters in support of the project. We received another letter just wanting to make sure that everyone was aware that there could be a cemetery on the property. So, which during the site visit, Adam Ronan mentioned that, and we were kind of looking over in that area, but they're aware of that, and one of the first things they do with all of their projects that they're developing is a cultural resources survey. So they're going to dig into that, find out what's there and where exactly that is. The subcommittee did recommend approval with a special condition of $950,900 in rural funds, and that condition is an increase in impervious surface limits from the standard for passive parks. So that standard, this would have been the smallest impervious surface limit that we have for, it's based off of 1 acre. 0.06 is what it would have been. They would like to go up to 1/4 of an acre. If they absolutely have to, they're going to try and avoid paving where they can, and certainly avoid impacts to the trees and all of that. But their concern is with traffic going through there, that a paved drive through with pervious parking off to the side could be best for them long-term maintenance-wise on that property. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and as I mentioned, Adam Ronan with PRC is here as well.
Mr. Jones.
Academic, but could we go to the slide of showing the site? Where is the existing dock? It seems to be...
Right here.
That's
the existing dock. The existing boat ramp is here.
Okay.
Which is essentially
it's a ramp.
public
It's not a dock. That's
currently, no, there's no courtesy dock.
just a ramp. Okay.
There's no actual parking other than there's space for a few boats and trailers. They just park along the side of the ramp, and then on busy weekends it spills out onto the
Thanks.
roadways.
Any other questions for Eric? Perhaps a motion?
To approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Nora?
I voted against this project because I'm worried about setting a precedent with the impervious surfaces. 25%. That's a lot. I think it sets a precedent, to have that big, that potentially change that much.
Yes, Francis.
I like the access to water. I know there's limited access to water for people, and so that's why one reason I really support it.
Got it.
And
Any
I
other questions or
think-
thoughts?
Just Nora, I think agreed that a 25% sounds bad, but I think, knowing that this is a small property comparatively to what we normally do, I think if you looked at the total square footage, it wouldn't be, abnormal to what we approve. And also, I think the strict function of this being, this is needed. I have been to this boat landing. It is absolutely terrible the way it's set up right now, and very dangerous. If you remember from the committee meeting, a lot of people have to use the existing public right-of-way to turn around, and it's right on that curve, and it's not great. So I think this, and then understanding CCPRC's worry about long-term maintenance there, if you have, because you're going to see a lot of traffic there, and so I think the idea of a paved, actual drive with the parking being impervious is probably a good solution here. That way, it's going to require way less maintenance if it's all, let's say if it was all pervious. I think it would be difficult, especially with trucks and boats and the ruts that would cause. I think that would be long-term. So I totally agree with that, but I think in this particular case, it makes sense because just based on the operational nature of what this project is. Those are just my thoughts.
Any other questions or thoughts or discussion on this?
I'm all for it, but isn't there a rule about parking for adjacent properties on Greenbelt? Like we can't use space for parking for something next to it or something like that?
I'm not aware of anything specific to that. And I mean, I would think this would kind of be like one park, right? With you're essentially expanding the access that's there now. That came up actually with the old Piggly Wiggly site years ago.
Right, that's what I was thinking of, because there was a fire station or something.
There was a special condition that I think there's a commercial piece out there still that the commercial could not share parking with the fire station in the green space property.
Okay.
But that was a special condition that was placed on it.
Okay.
Jason?
That came up once before on one of the city's parcels, and that the use is dependent on the application. So if the use is not in the application and those are the deed restrictions, and it could be something very similar, simple as a parking use that wasn't identified in the application, a little bit different than the Piggly Wiggly parcel, but we have run into that before where parking was not in an application from a long time ago before my time, and the parcel was being used for parking. Anyway, so it has come up before.
Because I know it happened in North Charleston once as well, a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a project where it was solely being used as a parking lot for adjacent commercial businesses. Okay. And that clearly is adverse to the intent of the Greenbelt program, and they city of North Charleston did pay Greenbelt back for that property. It's no longer in the Greenbelt program.
Right. Okay. I'm all for it. I was just asking if there was a legal issue with it.
Any other discussion or comments? Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Oh, excuse me.
Nor nade.
Nor nade. Okay. Noted correctly. Okay. Thank you. The motion carries.
All right. Final project for your consideration is another one by Charleston County Park and Recreation Commission. It is located on Johns Island off of Old Pond Road and frontage on Simmons Creek. It's two separate parcels, as you can see in the green highlighted area. Totaling 66.7 acres, would be a fee simple acquisition with rural funds of over 1.7 million. The match is 241%, or over 4.1 million. The match consists of the Willow Oak landowner donation of $935,000, as well as PRC's investment in public access improvements over 3.2 million. It would be a passive park with trails and water access on Simmons Creek. There was 2 support letters received, and the subcommittee recommends approval of $1,729,800 in rural funds.
Any questions for Eric?
I have a question. I'm sorry I didn't ask it in the subcommittee, but for the county parks and recreation for their match there, is that already fenced off in their budget? Or is this something they'll have to go back?
I'll defer that over to Adam Ronan with PRC.
Good morning. I'm Adam Ronan, Land Resource Planner, CCPRC. Yes, that is accounted for in our budget currently. So,
Thank you.
Happy to answer any other questions related to this property. Yep.
Questions or comments? comments or perhaps a motion?
For approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Fantastic. Motion carries, and that's the last project.
All right, that is the last project, but we do have one other agenda item. It is a requested recommendation to council for an ordinance change, and it's related directly to title insurance policies, which our current ordinance requires one for all Greenbelt projects, but it can be waived by the board in extraordinary cases. This goes back to one of these ordinance items from years ago that really the board shouldn't have that capacity to do that or have to do that, and that staff should be able to waive that. So that's the recommendation we're asking you to make to county council, is to allow staff to waive the title insurance policy. And the reason this came up is for our corridor projects. The Mount Pleasant Way, they're purchasing recreational easements where they need to for the Mount Pleasant Way. And to do a title insurance policy for every strip along a 2-mile stretch would be frankly cost prohibitive. We've discussed with legal, and what they're going to provide us instead is just an attorney's letter of title opinion, which will make the project go much smoother, and we all feel like the Greenbelt interests are being protected with that, would be protected with that. So the request is just to change the word, the board, to county staff, so that we're not having to call a meeting to come to you to waive it for every Mount Pleasant Way closing.
Sounds good. I think we need a motion, though.
I'll move to approve.
Or Mr. Jones.
Yeah.
I guess I'd approve it, but I haven't even thought about it. I didn't see anything in our package. As a matter of principle, I don't like to have to look at an issue and never had been able to consider it. I mean, I would have liked to have pondered over it. And that wasn't
Apologies,
possible.
sir. I'll send more information out on that next time.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Eric? I believe we had a motion for approval, did we, from Andrew? And a second from Francis. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Yes.
Can I make an observation? Yes. Looking at all of these things that are before us today, it crossed my mind that we have some very important people. I'm not sure that they're clients or customers or what. Low Country Land Trust and the Parks and Recreation, and there are others. And I reflected, I really don't know very much about these people. I suppose I could go to the website, and I have gone to the website. But I wonder whether the entities that I mentioned, and maybe others who are important, who received grants from the Greenbelt and projects, a considerable number, we would be interested, or they would be interested in doing perhaps a presentation of what they have done over the 15 or 20 years of receiving funds. I'd like to know, and I'm not going to be critical, I'm just interested to see what they've done. Maybe they can boast what they've done, but a short presentation. These are the acquisitions that we've made, and the fee simple or rural lands and whatever, what we've done and what we plan to do, and perhaps an idea of your strategy as to what you plan to do in the future. I think this would be very interesting to us, and I won't say make it easier for making grants, but certainly we'll continue doing that. But I think it might bring us closer together. So that's just a thought, and I welcome your thoughts.
Okay, that's a good comment. Eric, is there any format to include something like that?
Absolutely. You set the agenda, sir.
Okay, all right. All right, well.
Maybe it could be an off-cycle meeting to where
Yeah.
we're not having to do a bunch of projects, but we come at 10 and we're done by 11:30 or something like that.
Yeah. Jason?
To that point, it's interesting to see the PRC making applications again. Just for everybody that doesn't know, the first half cent in the Greenbelt, PRC was very integrated into that program, and it was a whole different process that evolved into the subcommittee process and the current Greenbelt plan that we have. Those of us who were here spent an enormous amount of time updating the Greenbelt program from its original inception, which was totally different in a lot of ways. But anyway, it's kind of cool to see PRC coming back to the table again. So,
Yeah. Well, Eric, maybe offline we can talk about how to create a, sort of time-sensitive series of presentations on a comprehensive partnership look. I don't know.
And
Francis?
a different perspective I was thinking about too, if there could be maybe like a simple survey, just to ask them about the process. What would they like to see? What do they think is difficult? And maybe get a little feedback like that. It could inform the process and help it a little bit. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay.
All right, any other comments for today? Yes, Barbara?
I think I'd like to propose that we meet quarterly as opposed to semi-annually, just to make it easier for applications, and it sounds like it would be a good thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I think
So
timing it,
you're recommending we move to quarterly cycles instead of twice annually?
Well, what would you think would be the best for accomplishing our work?
We can certainly take a look at that.
Well, you're not necessarily saying change the cycle so much as meet quarterly to stay more in touch. Is that correct?
No, I was thinking that maybe we
The cycle would
coordinate the cycles with other, like funding sources and that sort of thing. Make it easier for people to submit complete applications and.
Okay, Jason.
So if they were submitting what we might feel is not a fully complete application, it's easier to say you can wait until next cycle instead of having to wait 6 months
Right.
while you're getting it together. Yeah, just
I think that just, it may increase more applications that aren't fully vetted yet, is my guess. And I think that if the GAB wanted to meet on that frequency, if there were agenda items to talk outside of applications, maybe that's a good idea.
But the cycle should stay the same.
I think so, but
we'll
I
have
think.
to look deeply into that because you all don't see everything that goes on behind the scenes to get to this point. And, it's typically 3 or 4 months from the time they're submitted to getting here.
Yeah, I would think keep 2 cycles, but meet, like you say, quarterly to have a follow-up so that, because if you defer an application today, it's gonna blow most of them out of the water. 6 months, everything's changed, So like give a follow-up chance so you could feel more comfortable deferring something because it would only be a couple of months, so they'd still have time to, do whatever they had to do. And also to address some of the stuff that we don't address during these meetings, like we keep talking about, like we need to talk about the small landowner fund and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I would encourage us, meeting so infrequently, encouraging the communication at this table during this meeting and perhaps another quarterly meeting, I think helps us all kind of understand what's going on a little bit more.
It's like a mid-cycle meeting, basically.
And we can call meetings at any time as well. I mean, you have the ability to do that currently. And we do typically meet in January or February. It's kind of that interim. I know we were working on stuff in the past that's not necessarily related to projects. So I guess what I'm saying is you might want to maintain the flexibility to set that meeting when it's really needed in between considering projects instead of maybe having a standard, we're going to meet on these exact dates.
I think that makes sense if you had something, bring it to the chairman and then
We could
figure out if there's a special meeting that we need to have.
Historically, holiday meetings have been very difficult to organize, I will
Yep.
say. But yeah, if we have even a single thing pop up prior to January, we could meet prior to January and perhaps talk about some of these other topics. But why don't we wait and see, and you and I can discuss it. And if y'all have input, please let us know. But in this time today, I think we should keep moving Any other, or you have a comment, Eric?
I'd like a comment.
Yeah, Taylor.
I kind of like the discussion because we have a board that likes to meet.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think that's important.
Yeah.
And I would like to find out if Charlie's still getting that cup of coffee.
I wonder. I wonder. Yeah, an amazing Houdini right there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'd like to just make a note that today is Francis's last meeting, and Francis, thank you so much for being a part of this board. It's been awesome to work with you. Yeah, thank you. Eric, do you have any other business?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Charlie, man.
Charlie, man, that's great.
He was-
Yeah.